Welcome to Being at Home with George, and it's exciting to be here with you today. It happens to be Saturday, the day between Good Friday and Easter Sunday. And as usual, I like to talk about this idea of creating the possibility of embracing whatever comes up, good, bad, or ugly, painful, joyful, whatever, and at the same time generating hope. And so obviously, we're in this challenging time of COVID as well as significant events that are happening in terms of social injustice, two people being killed in a confrontation at the Capitol. And who knows, there's many other things that are going on all around the world. And I like to think about or reflect on the fact that it's Easter Sunday, and it reminds me of Good Friday, which could be considered, the death or the being nailed to the cross of Jesus Christ, obviously, as well as a couple other folks on that day. I think there were three people crucified, if I remember. But anyways, Good Friday, the death and the resurrection, and this idea of how it's happening now, and what does that teach us? What does that tell us about the future? And I know for myself, my experience is when we talk about generating the hope, we understand that we need to access the power of now. That now is the time that we're either making investments or we're creating more of the same. And I'm reminded of this idea of the fact that we live into the future that we see. And so if we don't create a future for ourselves that we can look forward to, or if we don't generate enough hope that we look forward to the future, then we end up just meandering around and maybe just wasting energy and time and not having access to power, feeling like a victim or feeling like we have to go get what we want in a aggressive way where we're not interested in whether we're hurting others and ourselves. And so I'm reminded of just shortly before this call, I got a call from my friend John, my oldest friend, and he reminded me of our ritual on Easter Sunday when we were kids, going back decades ago. And he reminded me that we had this plan. We would go to church on Easter Sunday like everyone else. But then after church, we had, because we live in Massachusetts, in Boston, be specific about it. And during Easter, it could be 60 degrees or it could be a snowstorm. And so the future we created, we talked about, okay, on Easter, we're going to go to church. And then afterwards, we're either going to go to the beach where we had amusement park and rides. Revere Beach at that time was very lively and had a lot going on, even live entertainment. Or we would go to the music hall or go downtown Boston to one of the movie theaters. And it wasn't just us; it was the whole community. That's what we did. We did either or. So depending on the weather, we would either go to the beach or we go to the movies. And I think that's a metaphor for us now as well, as we have to create a future that we want to live into. We live into the future we see, so we have to be able to access the power of now. Okay, we have this crisis and we're getting closer. I've been vaccinated, but there's still a rise in infections and there's still a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of healing to be done, and there's a lot of rebuilding and build back better, but also this idea of how do we manage the moment? Are we investing? Are we creating a future we want to live into based on how we handle the now? Or are we reacting to things and not really being clear about the fact that what we do now creates tomorrow? And at the same time, if we're dwelling on yesterday or tomorrow and we're not keeping the moment in mind and taking responsibility for what I'm doing and what I'm creating, then it could be a whole other outcome that we're not interested in, or we might be surprised by it. But on some level, we get to choose how we are being and understanding that how we invest our time now, especially around thoughts and about what we want versus what we don't want. That it's the challenge that we have this ability. So I see it as an opportunity. I see it as, okay, so this is what's happening. I get to choose how I'm going to respond to it and how I'm going to do things now that help to get better in the future, because there's better days ahead of me as long as I understand that what I do now has an impact on tomorrow. And so the death and resurrection is one way to look at it. Another way is there's an ending, and every ending has a beginning, and every beginning has an ending. And so there's this transitional process that we're engaged in, or the intransiency of life, is that there's people that we might love that live here, live close to us, then they move away. Or some of us, they're here today and they're going tomorrow. They're dying. They're moving, or they're transitioning into from work into retirement. And there's all sorts of movement going on. And the challenge is always, how am I living? How am I managing this moment? And am I keeping in mind what my values are? And am I keeping in mind not only what my values are, but am I helping or hurting the situation? And so for me, it really does come down to me understanding that even though things are changing all the time, it's an opportunity for me to be grateful for what I have, be grateful for the fact that as long as I'm breathing, as my friend Jon Kabat Zinn says, as long as I'm breathing, there's more right with me than what's wrong with me. And things can be complicated. About 3 weeks ago, I went through some challenging times after I got my second vaccination shot, and I had symptoms, but I got through it. And I will tell you that after going through 10 or 12 hours, whatever it was, of going through some of the symptoms like nausea and a constant headache and diarrhea and not being able to eat for 10 hours, I can't tell you how grateful I feel now just to not be sick. It's like Titnan a non-toothache. You don't appreciate not having a toothache until you have a toothache. And so right now, it's like we need to appreciate the people we can be around, or reaching out to people we love, because there's no guarantee they're going to be here tomorrow. So we want to be able to say no regrets. We want to be able to say that I lived this moment fully, and I don't have any regrets because I left everything on the table, on the floor, on the court. I was fully engaged in this moment. And so for me, that is the real challenge here. Can we get beyond the illusion of separateness and understand I and the other are one? So can I be selfish by taking care of myself, being responsible and reaching out to others? And at the same time, by being selfish, it allows me to be selfless, because now I have more to give, and I'm coming from a place of authenticity, where I'm saying, this is how I'm managing the moment. This is how I'm handling my crises, or this is how I'm handling my loss. And this is how I'm dealing in this time of severe need, but at the same time, there's light at the tunnel. There is some relief coming, but we have to stay present for it. And at the same time, I have to be willing to be able to help myself and help others now in this moment. And really, sometimes that's just giving people hope. If you're talking to a friend, or you're talking to someone who's feeling a little bit down and out, or feeling like there's no hope, how do we help them see that there's hope? And that even in unavoidable suffering, as Viktor Frankl stated, because he's no longer here, is that when we find meaning in suffering, it ceases to be suffering. And so the attitude that I have towards what's happening to me, what's happening to us, has everything to do with whether we find meaning in it and we have some peace in the middle of an unavoidable situation. So for me right now, a lot of it has to do with gratitude, being thankful, and seeing how I can help others. And at first, I have to help myself so that I have something to give. So in this time of death and resurrection, it also means that as I embrace things and say yes to life, and at the same time generate hope, that I'm actually creating a new way of being, and expressing parts of myself that have not been expressed. And in doing that, there's a death, dying of my old self and being reborn of my new self, or dying of the flesh and being reborn of the spirit. And so for me, it's really about the energy of love, being in growth mode, and how can I help? How can I generate a future that I want to live into, that I get excited about, and how to help others do the same. But the only time we have access to power is the now.